Welcome to the C-Suite podcast with me, Graham Barrett. I'm here at Pay360, a fantastic event that has brought the global payments conversation to London. Together with my colleague, Debbie West, we are going to be interviewing a number of the speakers and attendees from the event, and we really hope you enjoy the conversations.
Well, I'm delighted to be speaking with Angelina Kuznetsova, who's the Senior Managing Director at Arma Partners. Angelina, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And I'd love it if you could start by giving us an overview of Arma Partners and then your role there.
Absolutely. Arma Partners is a leading European investment banking boutique. We advise on M&A and private placement transactions to digital economy. What it means for us, it's businesses in technology, fintech, data, and IT services. What I do, ultimately, as we call it, sell and buy-side advisory. We work with companies in the fintech and payment sector, helping them to raise funds, crystallize full exit buyouts. We also work with strategic in the space, helping them to crystallize transactions, investing or buying other businesses.
Yeah, perfect. That sounds like a super interesting role. So what's your perspective on the fintech ecosystem and what do you look for when you're advising on deals in this space?
See, my lenses are clearly coming from M&A and transaction environment. What we just coming out of, quite tough 22-23, where the funding and number of M&A deals in fintech and payments have been somewhat limited. There was a lot of hope with presidential changes into the US that 25 will look more positive. At the moment, we're probably seeing it brought a bit more nervousness to the investors.
Right.
Having said that, there is clearly pent-up demand within investment funds and strategic to do deals. There is also pent-up demand from the companies for capital, further growth. Therefore, we overall seeing 25 as being a positive year. We're seeing it in our pipeline and conversations we're having with our clients.
Right. So, yeah, it sounds like exciting things to come for the rest of this year then. And what are the main trends and innovations that you're seeing right now?
See, again, my lenses were very much transaction focused. And what we're seeing, whenever there is a deal that involves a technology platform, which fintech ecosystem lends itself very well to, there is a lot of focus on kind of two key things when it comes to innovation and tech, is really how solid, stable and modern the platform is. Okay. And investors spend a lot more time doing technology due diligence than they ever have done before. So the real focus on downside protection. And making sure what they're investing in is really built for scale, could withstand cyber attacks,
right.
Or equally quite a modern technology, flexible platform that could integrate with multitude of other providers. And the second topic, which probably been mentioned here today multiple times, is impact of AI on the solution.
Right.
What the impact will be. And how would this business be displaced by AI? And what we advise companies to prepare very well for this question and really well thought through strategy for AI. You may not be an AI provider yourself, you may not have a solution yourself yet, but are you looking to partner and what is your strategy going to be in response to such evolution of technology?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Such a lot of discussion about the role of AI currently, so absolutely. And I gather that you're on a judging panel for the Pay360 Awards. So what makes these awards different for you?
That's right. I have been a judge for nearly, 5 years. And I have seen the evolution of the judging environment and the panel in very much positive direction. I really enjoy the experience, and I have tried other panels as well. Right. Without naming names, I kind of switch back to coming back to Pay360. And what I have seen over time, with a lot of focus, Pay360 as an organization expanded a number of companies that we attract to the competition, more entries from geography and product perspective.
Right.
Enhanced number of categories. The judging is taken across, we have quite a number of categories, so opportunity for businesses to be part of more than one category if you're a multifunctional platform. And geographically, there is more and more parties joining as well, companies joining from different geographies. But what I particularly like, there is a lot of structure and thought goes into criteria. We evolve criteria or tweak it every year. There is a lot of debate, so non-emotional, very hard look at the facts, what business does, and trying to be as fair and non-judgmental and non-biased as possible. And as a result, I found the decision-making process and actually who the winners are, who runners up, actually takes a lot of judging time. And there is a structure. There are criteria. There is always a bit of human bias may be involved, but ultimately I find that the overall Pay360 work quite hard to make the judging fairer, broader pool, and evolve. And every year there is discussion or an email come out asking what we haven't done well and where we can improve. So there's a lot of self-reflection. And I think as a result, we've seen more entries, more exciting businesses joining Pay360, and it's great to see the innovation coming through.
That's perfect. That sounds like a very robust process to keep those awards really current and inclusive. Yeah, excellent. That's been so interesting. Angelina, Kuznetsova, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, I'm now here with Dewald Nolte, who is co-founder and chief strategy officer at Entersekt. Dewald, how are you today?
I'm doing great, thanks. How about yourself?
Yeah, doing really well. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. Well, let's start with an introduction to Entersekt, maybe, and the problems you're trying to solve.
Sure, yeah. So Entersekt is a company that focuses on basically digital banking authentication and payment authentication, right? So we really want to make sure that when it comes to doing transactions online, that a consumer can do transactions anywhere at any time, from any place, from any device, without fear, right? I think if you look at kind of the history of where the company was founded, it's a co-founder of mine's mom's bank account was cleaned out without her knowledge, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
we were created kind of that in that shock,
wow,
in terms
yeah.
of a family member losing all their money without their knowledge. And so
that's a great backstory.
Yeah. And so that's been the mission, right? Is to make sure that doesn't work, happen to anyone else. And so from there, we've just been really kind of figuring out how to simplify authentication, right? There's so many new attacks kind of out there. There's so many, it evolves every day, right? And so I think one of the challenges that you see in the industry at the moment is the fact that because of this fast evolution, a lot of ordinary people are having to almost be cybersecurity experts to just use basic services, because they need to know what's phishing, all this kind of stuff. And we're trying to kind of, take the complexity out and just, take the stress away and just have them use their services.
Well, because, as you say, because this is a rapidly evolving and changing space, maybe it might be helpful just to give your brief kind of overview of the evolution of fraud.
Sure. Yeah, and so it's actually quite an interesting story. If you look at where we started, kind of the late 1990s, early 2000s, at that stage, everyone was kind of internet was new, online banking, that kind of services was new. So username and password was the order of the day, right? And so the problem with that is that's just a knowledge factor, right? And so if someone had your username and password, they could attack you at scale from anywhere in the world, right? Very easy to do that. And so the industry kind of responded to say, okay, well, we kind of need to bring in multi-factor authentication. So add a possession factor to that, right? So have something that only the user has. And the way that they tried to do that was with an SMS OTP, right? So the fact that they send an SMS OTP to your device, the fact that you received it then proves that you're in possession of the phone, in principle at least. Or these hardware tokens that generated the OTPs. That worked for a while until the fraudster said, okay, if you're going to do that, you're doing username, password, and you're asking this code, then we'll do a man-in-the-middle attack, right? So the next kind of wave of attacks went to man-in-the-middle, where they would send you a link, right? And I mean, it's still really prevalent today, right? So you click on the link, it looks exactly like your banking site, like, hey, you got to do some action or we're going to close your account, right? It's an example. And people click on it, it looks exactly like their banking account, username, password entered, and then SMS OTP is sent, and they enter it in the same channel. And now, the fraudster's in. And so we kind of had to respond to that with creating like a second channel, so like an out-of-band connection between the bank and the user directly, right? So that was kind of the solution to that, how the industry responded to say, okay, rather than having this OTP that you have to re-enter into the primary channel, you create a second channel, and then the bank and the account holder talk directly. So like, hey, is this what you want to do? Like those questions that you get like by push notification, for example. And then that worked for a while until the fraudsters kind of said, okay, well, if you're going to do this out-of-band channel, then I'll just call you and I'll tell you, hey, you're going to get this pop-up. Just say yes, right? And so now it kind of, the industry kind of had to respond to say, okay, well, to respond to that, we have to have multi-channel visibility, kind of to see across multiple channels to kind of pick up these manipulating signals, right? And then they went one step further once again, and this is pretty much one of the big problems today, is effectively saying, authenticated push payment fraud, which is the big one, where I convince you to log into your own bank account and send money somewhere where you shouldn't, right? So I'll have my Air Jordans for $20 up there, right? You think it's a great deal, want to do it, but you shouldn't, right? And so those kind of things kind of really, one example of those kind of things. So if you look at that evolution, it went from, is the user present, to is this the intent of the user, to now, should they even be doing this?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the tools that we need to build to be able to really protect the consumer.
Yeah. And what I find interesting about that evolution is that in those first instances, the onus was very much on the individual to be vigilant, to look out for these emails. But now it's getting to such a sophisticated phase, isn't it? That I guess maybe the onus isn't so much on the individual. And is that where AI can help? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting thing. It's AI is a very powerful tool, and really kind of helps us to evaluate a lot of data points, right, in real time at a scale that obviously humans wouldn't be able to kind of see the picture. And so certainly a really, really powerful tool for us. It's also a very powerful tool in the hands of the perpetrator, unfortunately. So we do have a little bit of that, playoff that we kind of need to do. But I think AI definitely has a great role to play in terms of pattern recognition. But I think the big thing that we continue to see is that when it comes to these systems, the data quality, garbage in, garbage out. And so a big focus for us when it comes to actually solve this problem is to actually collect high quality signals so that you can make the right decision. If you're fed bad data, you're going to make the wrong decision. And so we invest a lot of time to make sure that we capture the right and send the right data to these back-end systems that then is actually augmented by things like machine learning models and AI in certain use cases that can really kind of help us navigate and parse the data and understand it to stop fraud.
Okay. Well, let's just finish up by talking about another trend, digital identity technology. What kind of impact do you see that having on the industry? How do you harness that?
So I have to say I'm actually quite excited about the potential of that. I think it will definitely open up a new avenue of digital services, because the moment you bring in digital identity, you can start to do things like age-related e-commerce as an example, right? If you have a good way to verify an identity remotely or online, then things like age-gated kind of content, right, can become. So you kind of open up a better industry and a better way to kind of control that. So certainly I think some really exciting opportunities there. In terms of some of the solutions, right, digital identity certainly has the ability to really kind of integrate into all, I guess it becomes a central identity you can use across multiple services, right, whether that is e-commerce payments or, access to something, or even just things like managing your life, right? Like things like your financial planning and insurance kind of things, right? So I think such a widely applicable technology that we're very excited about. That the challenge, once again, the other side of the coin is with great opportunity comes great interest from the bad guys. And so really making sure that when these digital identities are issued, and at the point of issuance, that they're actually the right amount of security is in place so that it is actually who you think it is. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we have, especially with AI And look at these deep fakes, look at some of the voice capabilities that you can see at the moment. So that's probably our biggest challenge, stopping adoption of that kind of technology.
Absolutely. With every step forward, there's that fraud aspect to manage as well, isn't there? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, that was fascinating. Dewald, Nolte, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Well, I'm delighted to welcome Guy Noble to the podcast. Guy is the UK CEO of Guavapay, so welcome.
Lovely to be here.
Excellent. Could you start by giving us an introduction to Guavapay and tell us about your mission as a company?
Yeah, sure. Look, Guavapay is a business that's been around since, probably 8 years. We've literally just celebrated our 8th year anniversary. A little bit different in terms of the first 5 of the years of that was all about build of the technology.
Right.
And as we go through some of the, I'm sure over the next few minutes, you'll hear about how that's had an impressive part of the journey so far and going forward. And we do have this strapline that we use, which is all things payments. And that really helps us be able to serve our consumer base, our corporate base, with a whole bunch of capabilities, which, as I walk around here, I think it puts us in quite good stead.
Yeah, excellent. And I understand that yesterday, your group managing director led a session about financial inclusion here at Pay360. So could you give us an idea of the scale of the problem of financial inclusion from a global perspective?
Yeah, look, sure. It's an interesting one. And Ehan, I think, spent a lot of time in his presentation here at Pay360. It's an interesting term that we use in terms of financial inclusion.
Yeah.
And it's also, for this one, for me at the moment, seems to just be ever increasing. It gets wider and wider. And, if you look at it in the UK, you've got about 1.1 million adults that are underserved from a financial services. I've had the good fortune of working overseas recently in the Middle East and Far East as well. And you look at those communities that typically have been the migrant workers that everybody's referred to. And you see that they've always been referred to as those that need to be financially included. But we've got those requirements here in the UK also, we've got looking to serve or include everybody within the financial ecosystem. And I mean that literally, not just the consumer that perhaps isn't lacking the bank account for whatever means, but also looking at the businesses and the rest of the community that needs services that may not always be readily available from high street providers or others within the ecosystem.
Okay, that's interesting. And what do you think can be done to bridge that gap?
I think this is one of the challenges that you've got within the FinTech Association, and I mean that or FinTech world. We've risen to the challenge over many years in terms of providing these things. Crikey, I've recently joined the organisation, and I'm part of the press release. Someone kindly recorded me as a veteran of the banking system, which I didn't quite know how to take at the time. But with it, made you sit back and reflect about what it was like in 19-something when I joined the financial services world, of what we actually did as banking. And you compare that to now the power that I've got in my pocket, unbelievable, and at that inclusion side comes to that as well. What is it? I think it's 86, in the mid 80% of the UK population is walking around with a smartphone in their pocket. I can make an overseas transfer like there's nothing tomorrow. When I first started, that was someone walked into a branch of a bank, complete a form that we would then rekey, and then we may send off to somewhere in Birmingham, I think it was at the time. I was working for NatWest. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, that money may arrive. And I use that word may. And, looking at the way that the economy and everything else has changed, the way that we transact has changed, particularly since post-COVID, the immediacy of money that's required across the globe to support communities, to support and include everybody in society and commerce has had to change, and we've risen to that challenge. And I think where Guavapay is now moving into is we've got vast technology, which I mentioned earlier, and it's now packaging all of those facets into things that will serve different parts of the of our customers' needs. We have to be customer centric.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think we can understand the mission of financial inclusion, but what's the business case for engaging with the non-banked population?
There's still revenue to be made.
Right.
And I think it's part of a package of capabilities that I think we're all almost honour bound to actually provide those as well. It's not just we'll go after the cream. We must have everything and support everybody in some form or fashion.
So what are the specific challenges that UK SMEs are facing, and how are you addressing those?
I think you've got a very fragmented approach that SMEs are having to challenge these days. For our business customers, they're paying rents, the salary commitments. Suppliers obviously a very big demand on each one of those as well. So how do you get a bank account that enables you to do that swiftly and in a way that actually makes sense to the consumer? That's a big part. They've got to accept cards, Apple Pay, or the pays, should I say, in this day and age. That is all the way that we live. And it's making sure that we've got those capabilities. If they're selling online, we've got to be able to give them the gateways that help them to maximize their revenues, because they're having to go multi-channel these days. So that's where we come into the picture. If they're taking overseas transfer or need to make overseas transfers for payments, etc., we've got that capability. It's taking that fragmented ecosystem and saying, look, we can come to you with one. How do we support you? How do we make sure that you can do everything that you need to do? And at the end of the day, get on with your business, which is the business of doing your business.
Yeah, I think providing a simple, cohesive approach sounds like a really great way forward. So
worked so far, and we'll make sure we'll build on that as we go forward.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's so interesting. Thank you so much for joining us, Guy Noble. It's been great to speak with you, and all the best with your mission at Guavapay.
Lovely. Thank you, Debbie. Thanks for the time.
Okay, I'm here with Abhi Julaniya, who is partner and global lead for payments at Simon-Kucher. Abhi, how are you today?
Yeah, doing well. How about you?
Yeah, doing really well, thanks. So talk to me a little bit about Simon-Kucher. Give me an intro to the company and how you serve the payments value chain and maybe that broader ecosystem.
Sure. So Simon-Kucher is a strategy consulting firm. We are present in 31 countries with 46 offices. And there's only one thing that we do, which is helping our clients grow their revenues. So we don't get into cost cutting, we don't get into risk management and processes. It's purely about generating the commercial growth, the top line growth. So that's the work that we do as a business, and that's the core element of our DNA. We probably have maybe, compared to our closest 5 competitors combined, people working on the topic of pricing. So that's really the DNA and the bread and butter. And then we do support the clients that we have across the entire part of their growth journey, whether it is designing their proposition, whether it is figuring out how they should go into a new market, how do they monetize their products, their value proposition, their services, how do they set up the sales organization to be successful, the collateral, the training, the org structure, the incentives, right? So we really come in and help our clients throughout their entire go-to-market journey, right from inception to execution.
And that's exactly what you spoke about here at Pay360, wasn't it? I think you call it the monetization framework. Is that right?
Exactly, that is correct.
Yeah. What are the key takeaways?
So there are maybe 5 different components that I would bring out, right? The first one really starts with figuring out what are the objectives that you want to drive with your monetization journey or with your monetization, right? So before you start getting into the details, it's important to know, are you going after margins? Are you going after market share? Are you looking to go after the large customers versus the small customers? Are you looking for more speed in closing deals? Are you really looking to maximize the ACV or ARR, right? So we try and figure out what are the key objectives and KPIs a business really wants to drive, because if you don't have visibility on that, anything else you do could be a bit like...
It's going to be difficult.
Yeah, exactly. Rudderless ship, effectively, right?
Yeah.
So that's literally the pillar number 1 and pretty fundamental for us, right? The second part is figuring out how should you structure your value proposition. So if you think about your customers, what we usually find is that when you figure it out from a needs-based perspective, customers have differences in needs. So if you treat everybody the same, or if you use very generic way of segmenting your customers, you will end up in a situation where you're not really catering to the needs of the customers, but more really selling products, whereas you should be solving for customer pain points. So the second pillar that we really focus on is figuring out who are the needs-based customer segments and what is it that they want from our proposition versus the proposition on the market. We then move into the third pillar, which is how do you structure your offer, right? So you will have a variety of products, services, features, functionalities. Not everybody across those need-based segments would need that. So how do you create an offer structure that resonates to the respective customer segments based on needs, and do it in a way that it doesn't create a massive headache for the sales organization either? So creating the offer structure, whether it is a platform with add-ons, whether it is a use case-based approach, whether it is packages based on the feature richness, right? So that's the third pillar around offer structure. The fourth pillar, once you have figured out how to structure your offer, is how do you monetize that in terms of setting up the price metrics? Because, and when I say price metrics, is how should the prices change based on how the product is being used? Should you be charging on invoices? Should you be charging on based on the number of sites? Should you be charging based on the number of terminals? What are the different things that you should be charging for? And that is fundamental, because you are justifying the value that you deliver through those metrics. And you need to think about how it correlates with the value that the customers are getting, but also you ensure your cost recovery, also allow you as a business to grow the revenues as there is more and more usage of those features, functionalities, right? So choosing those right metrics is the fundamental part of it. And the second part of this pillar is everything that has to do with, should it be a subscription-based model? Should it have a pay-as-you-go component? Should it be a mix of those two? How should you monetize each of those different metrics, right? And the answer might be different for different metrics. So how do the different metrics models all come together? That's the fourth pillar. And the fifth pillar is, of course, the price levels themselves. So here we need to think about what is it the market is charging, but it's not purely about what the market is charging. It's also about how does the value proposition you deliver is different versus those on the competitor. So it's a value and pricing difference that comes in. What is it that the customers are willing to pay? What is it that the economic value add you deliver? So it's really triangulating all of those different elements to fill in the offer structure, price metrics, and models. So pricing, price levels are the last bit of the framework to literally complete the puzzle.
Yeah. It's an incredibly complex process, isn't it? Which is why, you need to be guided through that and to have that framework, I'm sure. Can you give us some idea about how that works in practice? Can you give us an example from one of your clients potentially?
Yeah, sure. So we typically have a three-phased approach in terms of how we solve it for our clients. And you're actually right, because we have written quite a few books on the topic, and they are very informative to people. And we even had one of our clients where every single senior management read the books, tried to do it themselves, and realized that it only gets you so far when you do it from a theory perspective, whereas when you get the experts in, right? So this client of ours, and maybe that's one good example that I can talk you through, we came in, we spent about a couple of weeks with them through a three-phase approach. Phase one was really coming in to understand their business situation, understand where compared to the market best practices, there are opportunities, create proof of concepts on the basis of our analysis. So this roughly takes 4 weeks or so, depending on the sophistication and the number of products and so on. The second phase for us is, after we have those proof of concepts, take them to the market for testing. So we speak with customers, prospects, through interviews, through surveys, working sessions, customer group panels, to get their perspectives, capture the willingness to pay, understand how the willingness to pay differs. And then we move into the third phase, which is assimilating all of this in together, figuring out what are the financial implications, figuring out how would customers react to it, what is in the interest of the business versus what is in not the interest of the business, and assimilate all of it to get to the eventual recommendation. So really a three-phase approach, which, depending on sophistication as well as the extent and breadth of our client, can take anywhere between 8 weeks to 14 weeks to go through this journey.
Okay, one final question for you, just away from the framework a minute. I mean, what do you see as maybe the biggest trends shaping the payments industry in the next couple of years? If I had to pin you down and ask you for one, what would you say?
Yeah, so I would probably say it's branching out from being pure payments into thinking more holistically about how you're solving for merchant pain points and becoming, in a certain sense, a platform that caters to the business needs in a holistic sense, right? So if you think about the payments workflows, there is order to cash, there's procure to pay, within which payments sit, and some of the successful players are going out and doing invoice issuance, they are thinking about reconciliations, they are even taking it a step further and helping merchants embed payments into their own customer journey. And for those merchants which are embedding payments as a part of their software solutions, an example, it is a really, really big revenue stream while providing their own customers a better experience, right? So in a nutshell, what I would say is it's the intersection of payments with additional solutions, whether they are software-based, whether they are more value-added services or payment workflows related. So that's where I would say the biggest trend is. So branching out from being pure payments to creating a more wider proposition for the merchants and their customers as a result.
Abhi, Julaniya, thank you so much for taking the time to share those insights.
No, thank you for having me here today.
Well, that's it from Pay360. Thanks again to all of our guests who took the time to chat with us today. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed the show, please do give us a positive rating and review on your usual podcast app. And if you want to get in touch with us, you can use the contact form at csuitepodcast.com. And you can find me, Graham Barrett, and Debbie West on LinkedIn. But for now, thanks for listening and goodbye.